Hi, I'm Mike Blume, and this is Lesson 25 in a series of End-Time Bible prophecy studies. And in this lesson, we're continuing the thought of the Old Testament church prophecies that have been mistaken as prophecies of a millennium after the church age in which God works with natural Israel. All the prophecies of the Gentiles coming to, quote-unquote, thy light are not referring to coming to Israel in the Middle East, coming to the church. And the book of Acts clearly stated this, that Paul and Barnabas said, the Lord hath commanded us, saying, I will give thee as a light to the Gentiles for salvation to the ends of the earth. And so let's talk about the idea of animals tamed in the millennium, according to Isaiah chapter 11. Some might respond and argue that a lot of events prophesied in the Old Testament have to be future because no such things actually occurred during the church age. But what they refer to are metaphors that need to be understood in a spiritual and biblical imagery manner of thinking. You see, for example, the wolf and the lamb lying together, which a lot of people mistaken as the lion and the lamb. There is no scripture that says the lion and the lamb will lie together. It is the wolf and the lamb. But people, when they read that, fail to perceive the spiritual application of this prophetic parable and fail to, quote-unquote, hear what the parable and saying is trying to give forth to us. If they would stop and consider that such statements just might symbolize something about the church, and try to think of some other New Testament statements and events that would explain the symbolism, because let me pause here and say we just can't make up any interpretation for some imagery we might find in the Bible. There needs to be some substantial witness in the New Testament to verify such a use of a symbol that we claim is there. But if people would consider that, they would come to the proper understanding of what these prophecies are trying to relate to us. Peter saw a vision, for instance, of the clean and unclean animals that he was instructed to slay and eat. He later realized that this vision was God's attempt at letting him understand that the Gentiles, whom the Jews considered as unclean in the Old Covenant, were now cleansed by God and expected to be welcomed into the church, as we later read in Acts chapter 10. And in each case where in Isaiah 11, the wolf and the lamb lie together, there is a clean and an unclean creature in fellowship. Let me read that in Isaiah 11, verse 6 to 7. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Notice that, wolf, lamb, leopard, kid, calf, young lion. It's a clean and an unclean picture, Jews and Gentiles. When one sees this, one embarrassingly realizes that we've been so spiritually juvenile in thinking that these were going to be physically fulfilled with actual lions and tigers and bears. The same chapter 11 of Isaiah speaks words which Jesus said were fulfilled in him so long ago already. Isaiah 11 and 2, And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. By the way, that's 7 spirits of God. You read of that in Revelation. And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. In John 7 and 24, Jesus said very similar to his disciples when he said, Judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment. It said he wouldn't judge after the sight of his eyes, nor reprove after the hearing of his ears. In John 8 and 15, you judge after the flesh, Jesus said. I judge no man. But we are told that the wolf has not laid down with the lamb yet, literally speaking, from those who take this prophecy at face value. So they misperceive the actual meaning behind the symbol of the clean Jews and the formerly unclean Gentiles coming together in fellowship in the single body called the church. Hosea's prophecy agrees with what I propose. Hosea 2 and 18, And in that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and will make them to lie down safely. And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, and in judgment, and in loving kindness, and in mercies. When you consider the meaning of Peter's visions involving unclean beasts and read Hosea's prophecy, you realize that dispensationalists have actually acted so carnally and fleshly in thinking these words regarded literal animals. God spoke of betrothal in the same breath he spoke of a covenant with beasts, because Gentiles were represented by the unclean creatures in Peter's vision when God was indicating that Gentiles would come into the church, the bride of Christ. When we explain these proper interpretations of the prophecies, we're accused of being too unbelieving in failing to recognize that God can actually change the nature of a wild animal and cause it to lie down with its former prey. Again, although God can do anything, such as actually make a wild wolf lose its carnivorous nature, what is God's intention of speaking of the wolf and the lamb? I believe God can do anything, even make a lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns if he wants to. But we know Revelation 5 isn't speaking of a literal lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns. It's speaking of Jesus in a symbolic manner. I believe God can remove a wolf's carnivorous nature. I'm not saying I doubt that and don't believe. But is that what God is intending to do according to that prophecy? Accusations of unbelief in the miraculous are simply shallow responses from those who do not reason through their accusatory conclusions before they make them. Let's look at Psalm 16, verse 8 to 11. I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoiceth. My flesh also shall rest in hope. For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Psalm 110:1. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand, until I make thine enemies thy footstool. Peter interpreted these very prophecies as referring to them in his day. Acts 2:22. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you, as you yourselves also know. Him being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye have taken and by wicked hands have crucified and slain, whom God hath raised up, having loosed the pains of death, because it was not possible that he should be holden of it. For David speaketh concerning him, I foresaw the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. Therefore did my heart rejoice, and my tongue was glad, more also my flesh shall rest in hope. Because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Thou hast made known to me the ways of life. Thou shalt make me full of joy with thy countenance. Men and brethren, Peter said, let me freely speak unto you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us unto this day. Therefore, being a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him, that of the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, he would raise up Christ to sit on his throne. He, seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell, neither his flesh did see corruption. This Jesus hath God raised up, whereof we are all witnesses. In verse 30, therefore, being a prophet, knowing that God has sworn with an oath to him. You see, Peter said David's prophecy concerning Christ's position at the right hand of God was fulfilled when Jesus Christ resurrected and ascended up to God into heaven. The idea of physically making enemies into a literal footstool, and by being turned into a cushion with 4 little legs to support it, or however one may consider a footstool to be constructed, is clearly not the intended interpretation of these prophecies. Peter referred to the throne of David being occupied by Christ. And the only seating Peter continues to refer to is the right-hand seating of Christ on God's throne. Dispensationalists comment that this is a reference to 2 different thrones. What is their reason? They say David's throne was on the earth and the right-hand throne is not. Think of it, folks. David's throne is speaking of David's dynasty, as much as David's house speaks of David's family. Continue in lesson 26 for the remainder of this lesson.